So I was just going along, living my life, forgetting that Call of the Wild ever existed. And then recently, Corridor Crew released this video.
The Call of the Wild.
And suddenly, I remembered everything. Okay, maybe I'm coming on kind of strong. The movie wasn't bad, per se. I didn't particularly like it, but it's not my least favorite movie either. For any point of reference, my worst rated movie is Alvin and the Chipmunks 2 Chipwrecked. For those who don't know, The Call of the Wild is a 2020 adventure movie about a dog who was forcibly taken from home and brought to Yukon to become a sled dog, where it eventually befriends Harrison Ford. And it kind of gained a notoriety for both its supposed uncanny valley animated dogs and the fact that the main dog was stood in by a human being. When I watched it with my family, they were quick to call out that the dogs looked obviously fake, but here's the thing. Like Corridor Crew says, the animation and rendering are all technically perfect. If you take a screenshot of any frame, you wouldn't be able to tell the dog was fake. If you consider the animation, it is pretty amazing that they got the dogs to express emotion without feeling like they're breaking any physical limitations that a real dog would have. And yet, something seems really off. So what exactly is the problem? The fakeness and uncanniness that people tend to notice doesn't come from bad animation or bad rendering. It comes from the fact that said animation doesn't fit with the rest of the film. We know real dogs can't emote like this, and this isn't helped when the film puts these animated dogs right beside real-life human beings. It creates a disconnect in our heads. We perceive the movie and everything in it as live action, and thus when we see an animated dog that looks like a real dog, then we expect it to act like a real dog. But when it doesn't, our brain tells us that this is wrong and this is fake. To avoid this, they would either have to tone down the animation, which I don't think would be fair because the animators actually did a spectacular job, or they would have to change our expectations. And by that, I mean they would have to make the movie not live action. Let's take a short detour and talk about The Lion King. One of the biggest critiques of The Lion King, aside from the fact it's considered to be just another Disney cash grab preying on your nostalgia, is that the characters aren't really expressive enough. The argument that real lions can't emote like the lions in the original movie, so therefore it's reasonable that the CG lions are emotionless in the live-action reboot doesn't hold much ground because A, the movie is fully animated and they had all the creative control to make the characters do whatever they wanted and they just chose not to. B, Narnia had a CG lion way back when and it looked miles more expressive without looking cartoonish or out of place.
Do not cite the deep magic to me, witch. I was there when it was written.
And C, we have now seen Call of the Wild and know it's absolutely possible to make realistic CG animals that still have good readable expressions. And the type of animation in Call of the Wild would have worked leagues better in The Lion King because The Lion King doesn't give us live-action animals or humans to compare to, and thus the extremely expressive animation wouldn't look out of place. And that is why I think Call of the Wild would have been less uncanny valley-inducing if it were not live-action at all and was instead wholly animated. It would have made it easier to switch our brains from, this is live-action and it looks weird, to, this is animated so it's not that weird. Take a look at this opening sequence. We are introduced to the main dog Buck as he runs through the house, wreaking mayhem, jumping on beds, making the kids bounce 5 feet into the air. This is cartoon physics. This type of stuff works best in an animated format because then we're not thinking, oh god, he just flung those human children in the air, and are instead thinking, haha, what wacky antics. In fact, this whole sequence reads like a cartoon, from the way the servants react to him and the exaggerated way Buck runs through the house and threatens to destroy everything. And Dan Stevens? His character is practically a cartoon villain already.
Say, you go.
Hal, he can't.
Move.
This movie has the makings of a good-looking animated movie in it, but no, it just had to be live action. Obviously, I'm not going to act like having the movie be animated will solve all of its problems, but I think it would at least have solved the most pointed out issue, which is that the dog animation does not mesh with the rest of the movie. My point is, in animation, we can suspend our disbelief. We can believe a dog can do this. We can believe a dog can do that. And we can very well believe that a dog can do this. Now, I said I would love if this movie was animated, but I haven't specified on how it should be animated. On one hand, I feel like they should keep the photorealistic dogs, just because of how impressive that is. But on the other hand, that means the humans would also have to be photorealistic CG. We've seen CG humans before, and they still have the tendency to look kind of creepy. Otherwise, they could have stylized CG like Alpha and Omega. Okay, maybe not that, like Disney's Bolt. Personally, I would love it if it were 2D traditionally animated like Balto or Spirit. Actually, come to think of it, Call of the Wild and Spirit are already kind of similar anyway, both featuring an extremely smart animal protagonist who doesn't talk, so it must convey emotion and intent through its very nuanced body language and expressive gaze. There's also being kidnapped by humans, the Call of the Wild, a human friend, and this sled pulling scene. I mean, can you even begin to imagine if Spirit were live action and all the horses were CGI and they still had to act the way they do in the original cartoon, and the real-life human actors had to interact with them? That would be terrifying. It wouldn't work at all, the same way this doesn't work at all. In the end, regardless of 3D or 2D animation, I don't think the idea of a fully animated Call of the Wild would have flown. There's kind of this idea that animation is for kids and doesn't appeal to adults, which I think it's bullcrap. I don't know what age range the Call of the Wild is marketed towards. I think it's one of those made-for-everyone adventure movies, and even then it's still bombed hard. I also kind of have this sneaking suspicion that there's this unspoken belief that live-action movies are the final form of any kind of media. Look at how many live-action reboots Disney has already made and planned to make. Why do these reboots have to be live-action? Because that's just the natural next step. Like, if a really popular book got adapted into an animated movie, there would still be loads of people going, great! Now can we get a live-action one? Because they don't just want to see their favorite characters on screen, they want to see them alive. So what incentive would Hollywood have in making this movie animated if they could just make it live-action to begin with? Like I said, making it animated wouldn't solve every problem it had. I don't think the dog animation is the real reason it didn't do well and why no one wanted to see it. The general plot and lack of public appeal probably has more to do with it. But the dog thing is just the easiest thing to point out, and that's why all the reviews, even the positive ones, say something about the CG dog. If it were animated, it probably still would have bombed, and then they'd just blame its failure on the fact that it was animated instead of everything else. But you know, I just want to see more 2D animated movies in theaters, okay?